Even when I was growing up, she just impressed me. She was just one of those women who could play any game. She was good at doing everything athletic. But you know, when she was growing up, there were no teams for women. And even when I was growing up, there were no teams for women. You could play your high school team, and if you went to college, there'd be a college team, but there were no professional women athletes. And so, last Sunday, what happened last Sunday, Nico? Yes, the USA women won, the soccer team, won Soccer World Cup in their game in the finals against Japan, right? We're champions! Yeah, I look at that and I say, wow, my mom, who is such an amazing athlete, she probably could have been a professional athlete back in the day. And women that I knew when I was younger, they could have been. But now finally, there are professional women athletes and the whole world is celebrating them. How wonderful is that? And so, but when I think about it, I think, wow, how did that happen? How did things change from when my mom was growing up and I was growing up to today when we have these wonderful women athletes out there? And I'm realizing it's because there were people who worked together. There were women and there were men. And there were athletes and there were non-athletes. People of all different backgrounds who came together and said, we would love to have professional women athletes. We would love women to know that it's good to take care of their bodies and be out there as a full person, including being really physically fit. And so they started changing things having to do with schools and the laws around fairness on these things so that girls could get funding to have teams in high schools and in colleges. And then they worked with businesses to get sponsors for women's teams. It took many years of many people working in many ways, all with a can-do love, saying, yes, we want to support women athletes. And so when I think about the changes that have happened, I'm inspired by that. And I was also inspired to be, a couple of weeks ago in Portland, Oregon, with several thousand other Unitarian Universalists who have that same kind of can-do energy, where people are working together in different ways, people of all different kinds of backgrounds, to say, yes, we want marriage equality. Yes, we want everyone in our culture, ultimately, to be treated fairly and to be treated equally, not depending on the color of their skin, not depending on whether they were born into a rich family or a poor family, not depending on their religion or no religion at all, not depending on any of those things, but just honoring that they are wonderful, wonderful, precious humans, and that we're all in this together. And so I take heart by seeing the changes I've seen in my own lifetime Who would have thought in my lifetime that we would have, in the same couple of weeks, marriage equality, yay, women's soccer World Cup, yay, the Confederate flag coming down, yay, and all kinds of more. There's more that's happening, but it's because people with can-do love are coming forward and saying, I want to work with others, and we want to stand together on the side of love. So, yay! I'm excited to see what's going to happen next. And I'm excited, too, to have all of us be working on climate change and climate justice together, because that's going to be something that's big in your lifetimes.
The truth about ourselves, about this faith we love, and the ways it presently serves others and the world, as well as to open ourselves to ways it can better, more joyfully reflect our potential and core values. We want to know the ways we are bound to one another, as well as to larger religious movements normally beyond our sight and vision. We say we are open and diverse, yet it is too easy to feel stuck in old paths and stubborn habits, reflecting not so much tradition as our comfort. We want to answer the call to service to a world that needs our message, our hope, our revived energy. We are gathered here to learn, to unlearn, to hear, and to move forward. Amen.
That's what happens at the beginning of General Assembly, the annual gathering of Unitarian Universalists from across the country and around the globe. The opening ceremony, just kind of like the Olympics, features a joyful banner parade, and we were there this year with our special Ogden banner. General Assembly, or GA for short, is the official meeting of the Unitarian Universalist Association each year in late June. And I know that you may not be completely familiar with what General Assembly is all about, so let me fill you in just a bit before you hear from our Ogden delegation as they share their reflections about the time we spent together in Portland, Oregon. GA is the business meeting of our denomination, where Unitarian Universalists vote on statements of conscience, actions of immediate witness, bylaws changes, and in some years, the election of our denominational president and moderator. It's also a time of ritual, starting with the banner parade, and also honoring exemplary people and congregations who are making a difference in the world. Our very congregation was one of those congregations honored as a breakthrough congregation a few years ago. Another ritual is the service of the living tradition, where new, retiring, and deceased ministers are honored. It's also a time where new congregations are welcomed and our youth are bridged into young adulthood with some special rituals. GA provides an overwhelming number of learning opportunities, from the annual WARE lecture, this year given by Cornell West, to over 100 workshops, well over 100 workshops, addressing social justice topics like climate justice, classism, and Black Lives Matter, and practical topics like stewardship and membership and leadership development. GA is also a time for witnessing on behalf of marginalized people. This year, 2 major witnessing events highlighted the Lummi people and the Black Lives Matter movement. And of course, we just happened to all be there to witness the Grand Supreme Court announcement about marriage equality. What a memorable day that was. The energy was so high, I thought we were going to have to pull folks down from the ceiling. Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, just think about walking on the streets of Portland and having total strangers go, yes! Yeah, that's the kind of day it was. And of course, General Assembly is an annual opportunity to worship with thousands of fellow Unitarian Universalists. It's a joy to worship with so many kindred souls. The Sunday service was particularly moving, including about a 200-member choir that I dubbed the Unitarian Universalist Tabernacle Choir. Sometime I think that we should have RGA choir sing alongside the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. That would be awesome. I would love to see that. And so this morning, you're going to be hearing a little bit from each of us about our own experience at GA. We went as a team, sharing, reflecting, laughing, and adventuring together. It was an excellent experience all around. So listen now to our stories about the power of witness and human connection that inspired us to build a new way as we live more deeply into our Unitarian Universalist faith and bring these messages home to you here in Ogden.
Good morning. It was an honor to participate in General Assembly as a member of this congregation and also as the President of the Board of Trustees for our church. It was also an honor to participate in and to carry this beautiful banner that represents our church during the banner parade during the opening session. Imagine hundreds of banners of varying colors, styles, and messages that were paraded through this through the hall, representing the beautiful tapestry that is Unitarian Universalism. Following the banner parade, these banners were prominently displayed and hung throughout the Portland Convention Center, providing this rich background, this rich tapestry, reminding us of our diversity and the walks of life from which we all come. I was struck by the richness and diversity and the inclusiveness of the sermons that were offered in the morning and at the end of each day. And in particular, I was struck during one service that they had readings from three religious traditions. They spoke of the children of Israel's experience at the Red Sea in a retelling of the story of the dividing of the waters in what is called in the tradition of Jewish Midrash. And this is a tradition in which a story is told, but from a different angle, and maybe looking at this story as a what if, to bring new richness and interpretation in the story. This was followed by another reading, this time from the Buddhist tradition, regarding the mustard seed. Now, this is not the mustard seed from the Christian tradition. This is not your grandmother's parable of the mustard seed. This was a parable of a grieving mother who is asking a teacher to save her dying child. And she is instructed to go to homes and request mustard seeds and bring them back to the teacher, and he will save the child. But the only caveat is that the homes where she will request the mustard seed must never have experienced death or grief. What a different retelling of that story about the universality of grief and tragedy and loss. And this was then woven into the Christian tradition offered in the telling of the parable of the Good Samaritan. Where else will you hear a retelling of these stories but in a Unitarian Universalist setting? It was a beautiful example of the living tradition from which we draw our teachings in the words and deeds of prophetic women and men, and drawing from the wisdom of the world's traditions. We Unitarian Universalists like to think that we are inclusive and open-minded, but I was very much reminded in the sermon, in the service of the living tradition, by Reverend Marlin Latinar, that we can't be complacent. We may be very loving and acceptant and tolerant, but we do have our limits as human beings. Reverend Latinar is the senior pastor at All Souls Unitarian Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He led the successful blending of his church, a Unitarian Universalist church, with a black Christian church with vastly different beliefs and traditions. Now, I was a bit skeptical when I heard this. I had difficulties wrapping my mind around that, how you could blend a liberal faith with a more traditional Christian church. And he talks about the struggles that they undertook in facing his people's prejudices, in facing his own prejudice. What do you say to an individual who comes forward and says, I want to be part of your religion, and by the way, one of my spiritual traditions involves handling snakes? What do you say to that? And he talks about this beautifully in his sermon. And in fact, the sermon is available on the internet through the Unitarian Universalist Association website if you're interested. And we are hoping sometime to be able to view that together, perhaps in a religious exploration class, and to discuss the issues that Reverend Latinar discusses. I'd like to finally share with you experiences that I had in Portland outside of the convention center. On 2 different occasions, we were all wearing our sizzle shirts. That's the Standing on the Side of Love shirts, our sizzle shirts. And I was asked on 2 occasions, what is this with these t-shirts that I'm seeing around town? Is this some kind of convention? And we would tell them about the Standing on the Side of Love, and that this was part of the General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association. And they wanted to know what the Unitarian Universalist Association was, and we told them it was a group of churches. And I loved what one woman, she said, is this a new church? And we got to explain to her that Unitarians have been around since the time of Protestant Reformation, and indeed a very old church and tradition. But it brought a point to me that how ill-prepared I am to spread what I have found in Unitarian Universalism. I swore that I would always have my little business card with the principles printed on the back for just such occasions. Of course, I didn't have that with me at the time. And I was not prepared in a very succinct way to say what Unitarian Universalism is and what it means to me. And I think that this is so important that we're all ready for those, that we're all prepared and ready for those moments to spread the good news of Unitarian, of the love and hope and compassion that can be found in Unitarian Universalist congregations. I'd like to draw your attention to this little brochure that you can find out in the next to the administrator's office, and also downstairs on the information table, about 15 Unitarian Universalist elevator speeches. And I love what one response is that a woman indicated here as her way of introducing her faith. Our faith is not interested in saving your soul. We're here to help you unfold the awesome soul you already have. Thank you.
The sizzle shirts were so popular that I bought 2 for my Catholic hosts in Portland. I'm Evelyn Bertilson, a longtime UU and founding member of this congregation, and I've served in many positions over the years, currently serving on the Finance Stewardship Committee and co-chairing with Marilyn Johnson, the Religious Exploration Committee. I'd like to tell you about three individuals that I met at GEA. My daughter Catherine introduced me to the Reverend Dr. Gordon Gibson, director of the Unitarian Universalist Living Legend Project. Both Shelley and Catherine know Reverend Gibson through his participation in the Ohio River Ministerial Association study group. Reverend Gibson leads groups of UUs to the historic sites in the Civil War struggles of the 1960s. He was there at that time and has over the years forged personal friendships with many of the Black leaders and ordinary citizens who tell their stories to the UUs on these tours. Many stories are heartbreaking, and many stories are inspirational. Catherine went on this tour several years ago, and she has, over the years, urged her father and me to participate while these first-hand supporters are still alive. Perhaps some UU members might be interested in making this pilgrimage. A related story that Catherine told us at GA is that while she's been minister at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Greater Lansing, which is located in East Lansing, which is the home of Michigan State University, she has made numerous approaches to Black ministers in Lansing, but has had virtually no or only a lukewarm response. She says that since the word is out that their church is actually moving into Lansing, and she thinks with the 50th anniversary of the Selma anniversary, as well as the movie, that she is hearing a more welcoming message from the Black leaders. And I think doors seem to be opening here in Ogden as well, in light of these recent tragedies. Another person that I met in a very crowded workshop, standing at the door, and there was standing room only at many of these popular workshops. This one young lady absolutely insisted that I take her chair, and it became more disruptive not to take the chair than to let her go sit on the floor, which she did. And then we proceeded to run into one another the next 2 days, each in the lavatory, down the hall, and so forth and so on. She was from Chattanooga. Friday, I missed our gang going to lunch, and so I bought a sandwich and I walked down a quiet hall and ate my sandwich. And along came this young woman, and she was clearly upset. And I motioned her over, and she told me that her 89-year-old mother was having emergency surgery on a broken leg. As we talked further, it was clear her mother was getting the best care possible and that she had her family nearby. There would be great expense and inconvenience if this young woman left GA early. Compassionate listening is often all that's needed in making a sound decision. And as we visited more, I learned that she was DRE director at the Chattanooga Church for 6 years, and she had a major in theater arts. Their young people love to do Reader's Theater production. So I shared that we at Christmas time had done our first attempt at Reader's Theater. So she promised to send me some Garrison Keillor type Reader's Theater scripts, and I've already made contact with her. We exchange, of course, emails and names, and her mother is doing well, although she is still in the hospital. She's going to be a valuable resource for Marilyn and me, and for all of us as we reinvent our religious exploration program here at UUCO. Leaving the convention center for my car, because I stayed with my cousins during this time, wearing my sizzle shirt, I heard a voice behind me. Would that be Ogden, Utah? I was born there. The speaker was a lovely young African-American woman. We started chatting and mentioning names. I recognized the name McHenry. She said she was Velma McHenry's granddaughter. Someone she mentioned had worked on the railroad, which reminds me of my friend Georgia Turner. You know Georgia Turner? She couldn't believe it. And I've known Georgia since I was here with League of Women Voters. So I attended Georgia's 90th birthday along with Bev Dalley, a longtime League of Women Voters member. So Velma McHenry's granddaughter, who lives in Maryland, is a proud UU. And I'm going to take her greetings to Georgia in the very near future, which comes by way of GA in Portland, Oregon. We're all connected. As our 7th principle reminds us, these are just 3 of the interesting individuals I met at GA.
Both as a lay leader of this church as well as your interim church administrator, and I came back on fire. I'm a member of the Association of the Unitarian Universalist Administrators, and I had a wonderful opportunity to meet my colleagues as well as learn more about how I can be the best interim church administrator for you here at UUCO. Every year at General Assembly, there's a public witness event. This year's event was held in partnership with the Lummi Nation, who are the original inhabitants of Washington's northernmost coast. The Lummi Nation is on the front lines of climate change and environmental degradation. Not only is the coastal ecosystem that provides their way of life already being dangerously affected by climate change, but they are fighting to keep the largest coal port in North America from being built on their sacred lands. This coal port would desecrate Lummi Nation's sacred lands and waters. Sacred burial grounds dating back at least 3,500 years would be destroyed. This information was shared by the UUA president. At this point, I was devastated and in tears. At that point, a member of the Lummi Nation stepped up to the mic and he offered me hope. He said, "Sympathy is not what we seek. Today, I hope to provide some inspiration. Today, I hope to provide some courage. My hope is that after today, each of our tomorrows has purpose. A little bit more of one, possibly. Through stories of history and personal experience, I will attempt to leave you with a little more courage and more inspiration than you came with." So he started off with a story of a typical Saturday night at his house. His son had 5 buddies over from the basketball team from the city adjacent to their reservation. His name was Elder, and he was having dessert with some friends of his own. His son and his 5 buddies were outside chopping wood, and their dog started barking really loudly. And his son looks over, and he sees Sasquatch, Bigfoot. And then one of his friends look up and they noticed him looking over and they see Sasquatch and said, "Guys, run!" And they all ran into the house, slammed the closing door, the sliding glass door, and Sasquatch comes running up and slams his fist on the sliding glass door. When Elder saw the look of horror on his son's face, he took off his mask. My friends, the Lummi Nation is part of our beloved community as well. Stop again. The Lummi battle is emblematic of the global fight for climate justice, which also encompasses social, racial, and economic justice. Climate justice offers a new way, a way to dismantle the paradigm that treats marginalized people as expendable, non-human species as irrelevant, and our Earth as a supply source and sewer, rather than a single beloved community of interdependent life. It offers a way to acknowledge the disproportionate impacts of injustice on those most marginalized in our society. As a people of faith, we are not called to be optimistic. We're called to be faithful to our love. We're called to be the rock of the climate movement, not merely to add respectability with our signatures on a petition. We're not called just to provide photo ops with colors out front. As a people of faith, we are called to be the rock of the climate justice movement, the solid rock of hope that remains strong in the midst of devastation caused by this global crisis. How will we here in Ogden be part of that solid rock of hope amidst the devastation of the global crisis?
I have attended, this is my second General Assembly, and so having gone through the ropes on the first one, kind of being an observer for the most part, I was feeling I was able to engage more this time around, which was great because there's lots of great workshops and things to learn from. I tended to go to workshops that were entirely different from the rest of our folks, which is great. I kind of went with a specific mission in mind. Having been treasurer in the past, and I realized that we're all thinking about how to grow membership, etc. So my focus was to go to workshops oriented about how churches see the future of the denomination and what we need to be doing. Lots of recommendations on how to do that. And kind of the theme that kind of wove through those types of workshops was essentially the concept of radical inclusion. Being here in this building, people come, it's great, we get along, great, we bring our friends, but are we welcoming enough is the message. It's like, who are we welcoming? How are we welcoming people? We really do need to step up and to assess this question, because if our principles are saying that we welcome everyone, we really need to be welcoming everyone, and we need to know what that means. There needs to be actions behind the words. So radical inclusion is talking about, do we really welcome people with disabilities? Do we really welcome people from different spiritual traditions? Do we need to do anything different, or our messaging need to be any different to make it very clear how welcoming we really are? So those were kind of some of the topics that were coming around. Welcoming and radical inclusion. The other aspect that I paid attention to was, and some of the speakers have already mentioned, was the, Karline talked about the Lummi Nation. There's also the Black Lives Matter campaign. Those were two areas of social witness that were very prominent at this meeting. And we had speakers and delegations from those movements speak to us. And I was immediately affected by their message and how powerful it was and how hopeful they are to get help from us. We often get we lay back a bit, we have principles, we do what we can, but these groups of people have seen the success that we've had with marriage equality. They are here now to say, our integrity is being challenged. You guys really are for everybody. We need you there for us now. And so I kind of took it internal to that level to say, this is not lip service. We're past lip service. If you have a chance to listen to Cornel West's Ware lecture, he is very, very powerful in the message that we need to do what we say that we do. So the Black Lives Matter, there's lots to unravel what that's about, how we can help. And probably another message that I learned through this is that we sometimes kind of think amongst ourselves what people need out there. We need to get out there and talk to people in Ogden to say, what are your struggles? Talk to us. How can we help you here? Make it real. It doesn't have to be a global, the nation is experiencing this problem. It's like, we need to talk about Ogden. There's lots of things we need to be doing. We're starting relationships with some of the Black churches in town, great, but that's just the first step. I mean, we have lots of things to do, things that we can do to make a difference in people's lives. So I was really thankful to witness all of these workshops and the messages throughout, that we are really called to action. And so I've come back with that energy to be part of that, and I hope that you will join me. Thank you.
I also participated in ministry days, which is 3 days of meetings that the ministers have before General Assembly starts. Some of the highlights this year were lectures offered by two of my colleagues. Reverend Rob Hardy's from the Dynamic All Souls Church in Washington, D.C., urged us to embrace a Unitarian Universalist theology that proclaims not just that all lives matter, but that your life matters. He said this: our precious lives as Unitarian Universalists in the 21st century put us in relationship with others whose lives are contingent, threatened, precarious. Our shared vulnerability is a path to solidarity. And following on from what Rob had to say, Reverend Sean Parker Dennison urged us to be claimed by a mission so big that it startles and saves us. A mission so big that it startles and saves us. He asked us to consider this question: for whom does your heart break? For we can lead valiantly with our heartbreak and our failures, not our strengths, embracing the brokenness of life as an integral part of what it means to be human, not expecting or striving for perfection. And so I wonder, for whom does our heart break here in Ogden? And how will the discovery of that deep heartbreak lead us into a mission so big that it startles and saves us? Let's find out as we build a new way together. As we give each other the gift of our shared attention and compassion, I invite you to take a full breath in and let it out slowly. And again, breathe in peace and breathe out love as we prepare to pray together. Let us pray. O Spirit of love and life, help us to know our holy church, our place where race and class unite as equal persons in the search for beauty, truth, and right. Help us to be claimed by a mission so big that it startles and saves us. Keep before us the signs and symbols of healing change in our culture. Keep before us the Confederate battle flag being lowered from the state capitol in South Carolina. Keep before us the joy of marriage equality, once a dream, now a reality. Keep before us our resolve to stand with our neighbors to proclaim that Black lives matter. keep before us our resolve to walk beside those who stand to lose everything as our climate changes and injustices mount. Help us to embrace our broken hearts when we are coping with losses in our lives, as we grieve the loss of loved ones, precious animal companions, relationships that have ended, and the loss of ability that shifts our daily world. Help us to know that we heal by embracing our brokenness and by offering a loving compassion to others who suffer. Help us, dear Presence, to accept the things we cannot change and to lavishly forgive ourselves and each other. This morning, we hold Peggy Vaughn and Ann Morton in our hearts. May these hospice days bring them peace in this last chapter of life. And we send our healing energy to Janet Shipton, who broke her foot and needs to be healed from that. In the midst of our sorrows and our concerns for ourselves, our loved ones, and our world, help us to be ever grateful for the gift of life and for the wonders that abound each day. Help us here in July to savor the sweetness of the berries and the cherries. Let us enjoy the lush green of this season, of this particular July. Help us to appreciate our special time with families and friends in the summer sun and shade as we build memories of love together. Help us to know deep in our bones that life is good and full of delight and wonder that nourishes our spirits each and every day. As we each come here with many things on our hearts, right now you may have someone in your heart that needs to feel the embrace of this beloved community. If that's so, call their face to your mind, call their name to your lips, and say that name out loud into this space now. By our listening, we weave the fabric of a beloved community. May we feel the loving support of this congregation, our dearest, dearest loved ones, and the spirit of life that holds and sustains us through our times of joy and sorrow together. Let us enter a time of silence so that we can hear the heart words deep inside us that need to be spoken. Shalom, salam, shanti. Amen. Blessed be.